Okay, let's talk a little bit more about developing a rubric by putting one together. So first thing I'm going to do is go into Word, and I always like to change my page layout orientation to landscape so I have the wider page to work on. Then I'm going to go in and insert a table. And depending on how many criteria or how many levels of achievement that I want will determine how many columns I'll use in my table. So just for example's sake, let's go ahead and put 5, and I'm just putting rows in. I can always add rows. That's really easy to do. And so here is going to be my criteria. And let's say that I want to create a rubric for a discussion board, and that this discussion board is for a Comp 1 class. And things that I want to do is to make sure that my students focus on the topic. I want to make sure that my students use correct grammar, so I'll put that in. I want to make sure that they use proper spelling and proper punctuation, and I want to make sure that they respond to 2 peers as well as the initial post, which is the focus on the topic. Now I might add other things in there, and normally for what I teach I would put the grammar and the punctuation and the spelling all into one criteria. But since I said this is for a Comp 1 class, freshman level, part of what I'm assuming is being taught there is grammar, spelling, punctuation. So I'm going to put those in there. Now, it's a Comp 1 class. Let's say that my purpose in having students do a discussion is to practice skills. So maybe now we're talking about topic sentences. So I may want to put one in here for skill topic sentences, and maybe next week the skill that we're really focusing on is a conclusion. So I might change that skill to say conclusion, because this is where I'm focusing. So I can use this same rubric and just modify it for the particular skill. I'm always wanting to grade these things, but I want to focus on this skill. Now then, because this rubric is for those novice introductory students, I want to be really careful about the wording that I used, because it's really easy to discourage our students, and that's the last thing we want to do. We do not want to discourage our students. So I want to make sure that the wording that I use for the levels of achievement might actually encourage the student rather than discourage them. So one of the articles that I gave you to read talks about that, and so I think for this one what I'm going to do is my levels of skill are going to be something like awesome, and something like pretty good, and then good, and nearly there, and then maybe let's work on it. Words that are more encouraging. And I don't know, you may not like those. You use words that work with your pedagogical style, your class that you're teaching, your discipline. But again, because of the example that I'm giving, I'm saying these are novice writers, novice English Comp students that may be a little bit hesitant. Then I want to do things that will encourage them. Now, I said that the topic sentences are my focus this week. So if this discussion is worth, let's say, 50 points, I may make this worth 15 points or 20 points, and then everything else will fall in line from there. So if I make it 15 points, I have 35 points left. I want to make sure that they focus on the topic sentence. That's always really important, that they're focusing where they need to focus. So I'll make that 10 points. Now I only have 25 points left. I'll give 5 of it to grammar, 5 of it to spelling, and 5 of it to punctuation. Now I'm at 15, 25, 35, 40, and I'm going to give 10 points to their having responded to their peer. I want to, so that gives me the 50 points total. Then what's pretty good? If you tell somebody that they did pretty good on a writing paper, is that 80%? Is pretty good 90%? It's almost an A, but not quite there, or what? I'm going to say that for this, pretty good is 80%. So this is going to be 8 points. 80% of 5 will be 4 points, and you can figure the rest of it out. And good is going to be 70%, so I'll make this 7 points, and 3.5, and so on. And nearly there, this is where they're maybe at that 50-60%. They nearly have it, but not quite. And so let's make it a 60%, which would give us 6 points. And this would be 3 points. And again, you fill out the rest. And let's work on it. Let's make this a 50%, because if they've turned it in, the worst they're going to make is 50%. So 5 points and 2.5 points. You set the standard wherever you want to set the standard. And it may not be the same for everything. For the topic sentence to be pretty good, they may have had to do that at a 90% level. And so, you know, I would put in whatever 90% is. And to be good, they would have to be at the 80% level. So not all of your criteria, do the awesome, pretty good, good, nearly there, and so on, have to be exactly the same. You can adjust that based on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to focus on. Nearly there might be 70% of that 15%. And let's work on it. Might be if they didn't have a topic sentence, they just plain out get a 0. You know, I mean, you got to have that. Maybe if they didn't use proper spelling, they're going to get not 50%, but it's pretty important that they spelt properly, because that's something that you've really hammered on. And so instead of getting 50%, maybe they only get 25% or 1 point for the effort. These things you put in based on the skill you're trying to teach, the value that that has, how important accomplishing that skill is. Is this kind of a subjective thing? Yeah, it is. But it's better to be a little subjective as you're trying to figure out what things are worth than it is to later on when you're grading to try to say, well, what is this worth? How many points do I give for this? Because depending on how you feel, are you tired? Are you encouraged? Are you know, what was the paper look like right before you graded this one? Because I could have just graded the most awesome paper in the world and then turned around to grade a pretty good paper, and it looks awful because I've just graded this awesome one. So we apply those point values up front. And I'm not talking about what it takes to meet this criteria. I'm just saying the importance of this level of accomplishment. That's what we're putting in here, the importance of the level. Overall, for me, this topic sentence, this skill that we're focusing on for this discussion, that is the most important thing. So it gets the most points. Responding to each other and focusing on the topic are also very important. So that gets higher points. Using grammar, spelling, punctuation, that's important, all of that. But to me, they all kind of work together. So I have a cumulative 15 points equal to the topic sentence, but broken down so that I have to have grammar, I have to have spelling, I have to have punctuation, kind of emphasizing that. So that's kind of how you build the criteria and the levels of accomplishment.